The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. He has been out in front of what you see on the news every day on many themes. More, Chris has taken this macro knowledge and his unique analytical abilities to uncover unique investment opportunities. Often, he has guided his members to big winners in resources, biotech stocks, and more. His talents and connections often getting him into ground floor opportunities before they are discovered. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome in, folks. Today I'm going to shift gears a little bit with one of my recommended companies here at the National Investor, BioLargo Incorporated. As you see here, they're listed under the symbol BLGO. And also, as you see here, their website, ways to keep up with them, contact them for information, etc. I'll also have their website, among a few other things you'll be hearing in the next few minutes, along in the show notes with this link that when we put it up on YouTube. But for today's purposes, we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to have my good friend of a few years now, Dennis Calvert, the CEO of BioLargo, join me in just a few minutes. And we're not going to talk as much about BioLargo per se as I'm going to have him put on another hat that I'm going to get to in just a second. Before I do that, though, since we're talking somewhat about the company, here is the usual suspect slide, if you will, that we use at times like this. Dennis or myself, when we do talk about BioLargo, might be making forward-looking statements along with some of his other work. So be aware of that. And also, we are compensated to put out some of this information after the fact. You know, way back when I recommended BioLargo as a recommendation for my subscribers to the National Investor based on the company's merits. Companies don't pay us to be featured, but many of them after the fact, because they like what we do and our distribution network and so forth, will sponsor different reports or otherwise have yours truly and our team put information out in a wider way beyond just our paid members. And this is an example of that type of thing. So be aware of that as well. But before we get into today's specific purpose for having Dennis on, I do want to point out that he just this last week, and he and I recording this on Saturday, the 7th of June. But just in the last few days, he did a presentation updating BioLargo and all of its moving parts for my friends at Noble. And so I'm going to have a link to that video as well. It's about a half an hour. And for those of you that are familiar with the company, want an update, what's new, or if you're not familiar, this is a great tutorial for you besides going to their website. Dennis goes through all the different things. I mean, everything from the, you've all seen these ads on TV, I'm sure, the poof pet odor removal to their really breakthrough battery storage technology. That's one of the newest up and coming things for BioLargo. Cleara, their medical products division, is moving toward finally one of these days soon, some commercialization. I'm talking about that separately right now in the National Investor, and so many other exciting things. And it's because of all of those exciting things that Dennis was named not that long ago, actually officially the end of last year, to be on the U.S. Department of Commerce's Environmental Technologies Trade Advisory Committee, or ETTAC. And you'll hear him talk about that in just a few minutes. And it's largely, if not entirely, due to Dennis having spent a lot of years in a lot of different ways through the bumps and grinds and headaches and accomplishments and setbacks and everything that goes with this, shepherding numerous new technologies to market that improve our lives, that have to do with the environment, that have to do with a lot of these different things. And people in Washington recognize this and have him now playing a major role, not only on BioLargo's behalf, you know, that's certainly likely to be a part of this, but overall, because of his experiences with BioLargo and its subsidiaries, helping to carry the torch for all relevant U.S. innovations, attempts to market these innovations in other countries, bring them to other markets, knocking down trade barriers in other countries to these kinds of U.S. technologies and more so. So it's really a testimony to Dennis and his accomplishments over a lot of time that he was brought into this position with the U.S. Department of Commerce. Now, he will tell you this himself, I know, coming up, but I also need to point out that he is not here representing the Commerce Department or ETTAC specifically. He is talking, his own opinions, his own observations and experiences and things like that. So, in no way, shape, or form should you construe this as he's speaking on behalf of the government generally or the commerce market specifically, or Commerce Department rather specifically. But he's here as Dennis Calvert, who did have the bona fides to be brought into this added responsibility and realm for him, which he's told me many times, and I'm sure he'll tell you, he views as a great opportunity to serve the American people and American business. And here's my good friend, Dennis Calvert, who, again, for today's purposes, is putting on his cap as a key member of the Commerce Department. Give us again, I had the slide up before you came on, but give us again, Dennis, the official moniker of this part of the Commerce Department you're with.
So yes, this is a great story, and we're so pleased to serve. It's a service role, volunteer service role, uncompensated, and it's an advisory role to the Secretary of Commerce. And this appointment started at the beginning of the year. It runs for 2 years, and the Environmental Technology Trade Advisory Committee, ETTAC, ETTAC is the colloquial term. Every government thing has an acronym, right?
Oh yeah.
So ETTAC. Yeah, and so this is a very nice situation. The ETTAC was set up as a statutory committee, so it's part of a bill, and it was designed to allow for the department heads, the secretaries, Secretary of Commerce in this case, to have access to the front line of some of the leaders in industry that seem to fall in the strategic interests of the country. Now, remember, the Secretary of Commerce, we've seen Secretary Lutnick on the front line dealing with tariffs. And so the tariffs and non-tariff based trade barriers, okay, because the fundamental role of the Department of Commerce is to promote America,
yeah,
as America, and part of the presidential agenda is America First, and it's this idea of strengthening trade relationships around the world, and part of that through the Secretary of Commerce is to identify not just tariffs but non-tariff based trade barriers. And so, because commerce is really important for the monetary balance, right? And for allowing companies like us and others to advance technologies for the good of the world, for the good of the country, for the good of commerce. And
Well,
so,
and
so
Dennis,
this is
let
a
me
really
interrupt
cool
you.
spot. Now, I have to.
Let
Sure.
me interrupt you for just a
Go ahead.
second, Dennis, because a lot of the chatter, whatever people think, right, wrong, indifferent, good, bad, about President Trump's policies, and of course, it's been a moving target on tariffs and the amounts of tariffs and so forth. A theme that has come up regularly is how other countries have these non-tariff trade barriers to American products, to American technology. It's not they slap a percentage on it, they put up other rules and regulations. And so you're trying to deal with that as well as specifically in your case with this agency, with
Environmental.
ETTAC. Yeah, you're trying to show to the
With
world, hey,
environmental technology.
yeah,
Narrowed into
you
environmental
don't want to
technology.
block our environmental technologies. This is good for you as well as for us, right?
That's right. Yeah, and the thing to point out too is remember everything we talk about on this interview. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Secretary of Commerce or the Department of Commerce or the federal government, right? My opinions are my opinions. And, it's really not my place to actually have a lot of opinion about those things. The committee itself is actually a bipartisan. It's focused on making recommendations to the secretary that we believe could have impact for the benefit of the underlying mission of the Department of Commerce in line with the administration. So that's our role. It's not a lobbying effort. It's about information from people that actually do it. Now, in that vein, there's about 40 people that were assigned, and they really are leaders in the industry. Incredible. They're experienced and smart. They've got this incredible personal experience and corporate experience to bring to the table. And so just meeting them, it's a pleasure. Working with them is a pleasure. The government, the Department of Commerce is designated federal officers, designated federal officers run the committee, help organize it. They're incredibly skilled. I mean, they know this stuff like the back of their hand. It's a carrot and a stick. It's always the same. That's the way the government works. So they build incentives to promote the direction they like to head, and they build this regulatory frameworks, which is the stick, to make sure people comply with the law. Okay. The law. Right? So remember, so fascinating balance, right? It's a push and a pull always. And then there's this idea of sort of priorities. You know, what in the scheme of priorities is where they put the incentives. If it's not a big priority, you get less incentives. And they say, the market will take care of that. Well, let the regulatory guys, figure that out through the EPA or whatever regulatory body it is. So it's just fascinating. And so for me and for our company, it puts us in this really centerpiece of knowledge. And knowledge is gold, right? Knowledge is gold. And then and then what we found out too, and I have a funny story. I tell this often. When I got the invitation to join, I had a letter from the Secretary of Commerce that says, "Hey, would you, you're pre-DUP appoint you to this committee." And so I showed my wife, and she says, "Did you make this up?" And I said, "No, we didn't make this up." She said, "Well, what do you have to say?" And it took me a minute, right? Because this is my first time to serve here.
Yeah.
And of course, what you realize when you dig in is we actually have a lot to say. You know why? Because I've been involved with our company innovating on the front line across 4 or 5 industries for almost 20 years. Yeah. And so as a result of that unique experience as the CEO, I have a perspective that many of the people on the committee don't have, because we actually put our money where our mouth is. We've taken extraordinary risks to try and be a problem solver for these worthy, right? So that's one. And as a result, I was nominated and voted in as the chairman of the subcommittee for enabling innovative technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's fascinating too, because that's really where I might have value. That's one of the areas where I really might have value. And again, it might means because there's a series of things that go on in this committee that are really important. And this is, again, public information. These hearings are public. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking out of turn. The goal for this committee is to offer counsel from the direct front line that's specific and clear and concise and complete and actionable and relevant, timely in the world. And so think of it as the industry has a chance to have a voice. Okay, a voice. And so to me, I look at that and I say, if we can make a voice for good for the cause, and we help the Secretary of Commerce do his job and promote America, that's worthy of time, energy, and some money, and make it work.
Of course it is.
And then the other thing, and then the other thing we've done is we've reached out into our network of relationships, trade groups, and we began assembling some survey feedback, tools that create engagement, social media engagement, so that it's not just my opinion. It's a survey of how people feel about the tariffs, and are they optimistic about the tariffs, or does it scare them? Are they witnessing current feedback that's positive or negative? How's it going to do their long-term plan? What's it going to do with their capital expenditures? As an innovator, all those things come to bear in the concept of regulatory framework and incentives. I mean, it's just fascinating. So I think it's just awesome. And then, we're working to align that work with some key principles that are worthy to note, I think, that fall in line with what we think the current administration's vision of the future could hold. And so that's very insightful.
Yeah.
Give me an example. Now, I get the question all the time, is this tariff stuff good for us or bad for us? That's what people say. Now, I'm talking about my opinion. This is not the commerce, right? My opinion. And it's a mixed answer, right? Some of the things that we do, we directly import some of the components from China. Mm-hmm. And so that's not so great. Now, I think it's working out, but, it makes you a little nervous. And the supply chain issues with China are really a hot area of the administration's focus to break that bondage. Yeah. And we're doing business now with our battery technology internationally. And the feedback I get internationally is these countries, nation states, sovereign wealth funds, they don't like it. They don't like that supply chain issue. And so the idea of what the agenda for the executive branch is to reestablish U.S. manufacturing, that agenda is happening all over the world at some level.
Oh, yeah.
People don't like this thing. They're not happy, especially in battery tech. where the lithium chain and the production. So there's a series of things in our business. So the punchline of that is we have a mixed bag. We got to sort through supply chain. Sure. We got scale issues that while we're emerging tech in the battery technology. However, I got to say it's driving money. It's driving huge attention to capital, to the things that we're doing to advance the state of the art in alternatives to lithium for battery tech, to strengthen the America First agenda for energy and energy resilience, right? So resilience, high-tech manufacturing, U.S. infrastructure, net export dollars,
Right.
workforce development, fundamentally driving this attention to the energy resources of our country.
Well, and
man,
Dennis, you've pointed out before in talking about salinity, especially, that this is not about replacing batteries that go into EVs that sometimes are suspect and have accidents like we've seen in the news recently. This is a whole other area of energy storage, whether
right.
it's wind, whether it's solar, whether it's nuclear, whether it's small modular reactors that are going to have a big ascendance in the years ahead. From time to time, you need banks of batteries that can store that juice until it's needed, or you'd be able to harness it and direct it where it needs to go. And you've got a great project there that I'm excited to follow. I think of all this stuff that you've
Yeah.
pointed out that it's important that we're at a place now with certainly with the mission that you're on, where we're not having decisions on commerce and technology and things like that made with people because they have an ideology. It's because you've actually rolled up your sleeves, like you said, you've been doing this for 20 some odd years in a few different contexts. And that was what was recognized when you were tapped for this. And it obviously speaks well for you, but also for the agency that they recognize that they need people with that real world experience, not just people that agree with a certain philosophy.
Well, yeah, and even those, to give them credit, they've structured it so that it requires bipartisan things, right? I mean, it's really interesting, and ultimately, it shows the heart of the people there that they want to make impact for good, right? And then just keep in line with the agenda. I mean, it's fascinating, but yeah, I think that's true. And then, the reminder is our company's actually chosen. I got to represent the company. So the way I say it is, we were chosen because of our technology. I got to show up and didn't mess it up. Okay. And so my job really is to help. It's
Right.
really it's a service role in the end.
That's
But the
great.
access to the knowledge, watching it unfold, and even as we debate some hot topics, there are hot topics in these conferences where we're
Sure.
talking about the difference between um, regulatory enforcement at the EPA level for things that we know are troubling, like PFAS, and the balance between encouraging alternative investment into resources that can replace PFAS technology. That's a whole other theme. How do you clean it up? What do you do about passive receivers? This whole debate
Yeah.
about the regulatory framework, and patience is required, and in that area, it does impact adoption rates, right? The harder everyone comes, the faster you get adoption, but also you create some chaos. And so they don't want chaos. They want orderly, methodical processes in place. Anyway, to me, it's fascinating. I've really enjoyed it. And I meet some of the most interesting people. There's about maybe 5 or 6 trade organizations in that group that represent, up to 7,000. One has, I think, 38,000 members. I mean, so it's
Wow.
it's quite a group. And then some
Nice.
very big companies, a lot of senior VPs who've been in regulatory affairs, so they're well versed in the goings on at Washington, and then handfuls of innovators like us,
Hmm.
a handful of CEOs but it's a diverse group from all different walks and ideologies as well, no question.
Hmm.
But we know one thing, and I always, it may sound obvious, but from a personal perspective, as I've found my place in there and continue to figure out if I can add value, is I stick with what I know. Okay, so what do I know? I know from living on the front line that it is a daunting task to make change in these industries. And so when you say I'm going to do an innovative technology to change a market, boy, you better be careful what you signed up for. And so that gives me a perspective about the barriers to entry that are created from not only domestic USA, but also international trade, and say, if they're important, then some of these barriers need to be broken down. If
Great
it's not
point.
important, it's fascinating. And so then that becomes tools to say, gosh, these non-tariff based trade barriers are pretty significant. Now think about it. We've innovated in multiple markets, not just environmental technology. We got medical. We're doing now, we're preparing to export into the EU, into the UAE, into a number of countries. And so we're facing those non-tariff based trade barriers now, which means it goes back to standards, right? Standards. The USA has taken a position over historical that we are the front runner in establishing the most stringent, reliable, scientific-based standards in the world. Are we going to keep that up? Well, maybe there's a hiatus for a minute, but in the long run, I believe we will. You know why? Because we've got so much talent, and eventually, right, the stream points to a direction of making impact for good,
Right.
because you want to protect your people, you do the right thing, and in the process of getting there sometimes is bouncing around quite a bit. And so you got to you got to stay in the game so you can win the long game. That's the right. That's the concept. And so part of that role in the committee is to understand that. Right. Pretty cool.
Well, you know, it's like we say in the introduction to our strategic media videos, of which you know you're a part. That despite the fact that the world is fraught with peril, we've got all kinds of economic worries and financial worries and so forth, we still have got the brain power, the innovation, and the desire and the technology to find different ways to improve our lives, to clean up the environment, to do all these different kind of things. And kudos to you again, Dennis, for being in this position and the work you're able to do. I'm going to be really anxious to be following it with you in the months and years ahead. As you do that,
Yeah.
as well as keeping up with BioLargo for our own purposes, as well as for the rest of our audience. So you'll have to let me
And
know.
remember,
What's that?
remember the ETTAC publishes its letters too. This is public information, public hearings, public information. So each letter, so you can go to ETTAC under the Secretary of Commerce, and you can actually use a little subscribe thing, and they'll send all the letters. It's just fascinating.
I'll make
And
sure that I add that link to the show notes here so people can check that out.
I think that would be great. And then if anybody's interested, we're going to be posting some the survey information online through LinkedIn probably. And so my LinkedIn profile, I urge anyone to come join that and see these things, because we're going to be reaching out and getting feedback on some of these ideas to be more discerning about, you know, people's impact, vision, how do they play, what do they think, and to get your pulse on the beat of
That's
America,
cool.
and then. And you know, we really want to do something great. Our company is a mission-driven company, okay? And we've suffered long for that. And now, as I say, we're reaping the harvest of significant investment and patience, but worthy work, worthy of a career, worthy of investment, worthy of people's time and patience. And so I think this is an extension of that. And so we'll do our best to keep pressing on.
That's great. And as I said, folks, at the beginning, I'll repeat it again, that also linked, besides the other stuff that Dennis or I have mentioned in the last few minutes, we'll have a link to his recent overview of BioLargo and all of its moving parts, so you can get updated on that he
Awesome.
just did for the Noble conference online. My friends at Noble, I follow their work as well. So Dennis, again, good stuff. Congratulations, and I'll look forward one of these days myself, hopefully, to make one of these hearings in one of my trips to Washington. That'll be great.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Love it. I love it.
Take
All right,
care.
keep up the good work, Chris. Thank you.
You too.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.